Welcome to another episode of Ingrid's World. I'm your host, Ingrid Paris Hicklin. On this show, meet Donald and Sandra Manigault, the people behind Manigault Institute. Donald Manigault has been a teacher, school administrator, and an adjunct instructor. As owner of Manigault Institute, he has provided SAT prep courses, summer math camps, math tutorial, and mastering learning seminars. Sandra Manigault has been a teacher and a college professor. She also has done math test editor for the American Council of Education, and as co-owner of Manigault Institute, she has taught and designed extensive courses, material for the SAT. So let us now start with our interview. Welcome to the show, Donald and Sandra. It's great to have you back.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's indeed. And really, I love the fact that we're doing this show together because it's near and dear to my heart, SATs and doing well in math. Hey, that's the step. So first of all, we have parents out there are watching, and I have to ask you, how should parents prepare their children for the school experience? What are your suggestions as educators?
Well, number one, parents need to recognize that they're putting in a 20-year investment. And so if you're putting in a 20-year investment, when you put that child in first grade, you need the child to be organized. The child needs to be committed. He needs to have purpose, and the parent can help the child develop that purpose. Even if the child doesn't know exactly what he wants to be, he may think he wants to be, or she may think she wants to be a firewoman or fireman. And later on, 5 years from now, they might want to be a scientist or a sports figure. So their idea is going to change from year to year, but they need to have a definite concern about what they want to achieve so that a parent can show how English, how mathematics, how the sciences will help that student be the best that they can be in that particular area that they succeed. And once they change and want to be something else, they have a strong foundation.
You know, I love what you're saying. I love the fact that you're saying first grade, because that's what I always feel is that first experience. I see you nodding your head, Sandra. You're in agreement with that.
I am. And I think also it's important that the parent constantly remind the child that they can be anything they put to their mind.
And you know what? That is really, they can be anything that they want. And that is the honest truth, you know, to have that dream. So,
Right.
So the next question is, what's the true cost of an exceptional education? What's the real cost?
Well, I believe the real cost is the commitment of the parent to the child. And when a child comes into the world, it's important that they know that the parent loves them. And that needs to be fostered on a day-to-day basis, because every time they go into the world, there is somebody who is putting them down. And they need to constantly be lifted up so that they are excited about themselves, excited about where they want to go, and excited about what they want to achieve. They need the praise, the pat on the back, the direction.
I love what you're saying. It's the honest truth. So who's paying for this exceptional education? You know, who's paying for all of this?
Well,
I think both.
You say both?
the parent is really paying for uh,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of necessarily getting the child extra help. While the parent is able to coach the parent needs to be coaching that child on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes sitting down with the child. If the child is older, they need to be working or checking on the child to see that the child has gotten their homework done, whether it's algebra or geometry or whatever subject they're taking. The parent needs to be sure that they're doing it, they're putting forth their best effort
Mm-hmm.
on a regular day-to-day basis, and that the work is neat.
And then so Sandra, let me ask you this question. It's that I hear, the parents' commitment. What about if I was not such a good student? And here I am, I'm a mom, and I'm trying to do the work. What suggestions do you have for me? That I'm out here, and I barely got through math.
Okay, first of all, as far as math is concerned, I really think it's important that parents keep their own personal math history to themselves. I think you harm a child when you let the child know what all of your flaws were in education. So if you were a bad math student, they don't need to know that. They need to know they can do whatever they put to their minds to do, regardless of what you could or could not do. And one of the things that I really, make a big point of in my book for Math Empowerment is that children think that they inherit more than your height, your eye color, your hair color. They think they inherit all of your good and bad traits too. So
Right.
it's important for them to know that you worked hard if you did, and that if they work hard again, they can achieve. They don't need to know that you failed algebra.
What I know, you are speaking the honest truth because, so keep your math history to yourself.
Exactly. Unless you were good at it.
Unless you're really good, and that's what I always would tell my sons, like, you're going to be really good because dad was a math and physics major and you got this. And I wasn't bad myself. So I love what you're saying. So have you had an experience where a child has been negatively labeled? Have you ever had that experience where, a child's been labeled and they're given a lot of can't do this and can't do that?
One of the problems with labeling, we are labeled by our society, we're labeled by our parents, we're labeled by the media. And what we have to do is be sure that we are overcoming those labels, supporting our child, supporting them, letting them know that they can achieve anything that they want to, letting them know that they have unlimited educational potential. It's so important. Sometimes a teacher puts them down. The worst person who can put a child down is mom or dad. And when they do it, since they are the leader of the family, the child really feels more than anyone else. So it is the parent's duty to lift the child, to let the child know that he can be successful. I was speaking to my son a couple of days ago about his son, and I said to him, I said, your child is smarter than you or your wife. And he said, what? I
I
said,
love it.
your child takes the best of your wife and the best of you, and they're supposed to be smarter than you.
Yes.
And your job is to guide that child in making the kinds of decisions that allow him or her to be successful.
What wonderful sage advice. So we know how labeling can affect a child, but is memory a very important tool for excelling in school in general? Do you need to have a good memory?
Memory is essential the way we teach today. I would say that 80% of the learning process is memory, and 10% creativity, and another 10% understanding what the question is. Uh, I was very fortunate to be taught by Dr. Robert Light, Alexander Everett, in how to use the mind more effectively. And I was teaching people those particular things. And I was raising my child, Patrick, and Dawn, my other child, and I said how it was necessary to teach them about memorization, how to teach them to pay attention in class. And I taught them visualization along with several other kinds of concepts. And my son came home one day and he said, "Dad, I don't want to use visualization for memory anymore. It gives me an unfair advantage of all of the other students," because he was basically a straight A student, and I felt like socking him at that particular moment. But I backed off, and he continually used his visualization, and of course my daughter did likewise, and it made them basically A students.
He didn't know he needed that unfair advantage. It
So
helped him.
important.
He needed it.
So, Sandra, you said in your book that it's so important that music can really enhance mathematics. Speak
Yes.
more about that.
Yeah, that's really strange. I had a feeling that music had something to do with how you did math. And one of the things I used to do when I taught at Nova for so many years, I used to ask my students every so often in the developmental classes and in the more advanced classes who studied a musical instrument. And Ingrid, what I found is that in my developmental classes where students were redoing Algebra 1 or Algebra 2 because they didn't pass the placement test at Nova, only a few in those developmental classes had studied a musical instrument. Fast forward to the more advanced classes, pre-calculus, calculus,
Yes.
over 50%, 60% or more had studied a musical instrument. The other thing I have heard is that musicians tend to read better because they're constantly reading music and learning a different language, and music is its own language. But I also think that anything that enhances memory is going to enhance the learning of mathematics, where memory is critical.
Wow. So, are there other experiences that students should have to make them really a great math student? What other experiences?
I personally think if a student can study classical dance, they learn certain things because of that. In addition, if a student studies art, they learn things there, a different level of cognitive skills which affect how they're going to do mathematics. So I think the arts plays a major role, and there are other activities that have something to do with it, but I think dance, music, art, I think it all has a factor in terms of how a student's going to perform in math. And I think that if students can get those experiences, I think it's going to make a big difference in the long run.
You know, what I know you're saying is quite true. I had a conversation, Patrick, you spoke with your son, Patrick, Donald,
Yes.
Sandra, and I spoke with my son, Kevin, and he was telling me that, you know, he was practicing and he's a musician, and he could tell that the count was wrong. And they said, "Oh, no, it's right." And he says, He says, I went over it, and he said they were amazed that he could actually pick it up. And he said because he reads music all of his life and he was counting. So it's very interesting what you're saying. The crossover is incredible. So parents out there, we know, get them involved in these activities. Oh my goodness. Now, let's talk about, okay, so what happens if we're seeing our student and they're struggling? What can I do with the one who is struggling? I've done lots of different things, but they're still struggling.
Okay, well, I guess depending on what they're struggling in, if they're struggling in the early stages, let's say it's reading, I think that needs to be fixed. So we're talking about tutorial help. And I think if you have someone who is having struggles reading, you need to find out exactly why. And sometimes it's a matter of very, very basic things, phonics possibly.
Right.
I think also if a student is struggling in the early ages, I think it's a matter of parents making the time over the weekend, if necessary, to sit down with the child and really work with the child in the area that is troubling. And I think very often parents figure, well, I'm not a professional. You don't have to be a professional. You just have to be patient. And you have to also get supplementary materials if necessary. There is so much available in stores like Barnes and Nobles where you can go and look at the material and see if it's appropriate. I know stuff's available online, but you can't examine stuff online the same way you can examine it if it's in front of you.
Right.
I think also in terms of math, if a student is struggling, same thing. There are certain things that are missing if a student's having trouble keeping up with the teacher in class. And certainly in this virtual environment, parents need to know, what is my child having difficulty with? And I think parents need to always look into the option of supplementary materials, because students learn in different ways. And sometimes textbooks and teaching patterns are best for one child, but not for another. And I think parents have to examine all those options.
Love what you're saying. So what you're saying is one size does not fit all. So you have to be open to trying lots of different techniques. Love it.
If you're going to develop the genius capacity in an individual, it requires flexibility. And you have to determine what that individual is attuned to, and you need to amplify that.
Ah, very good. So when it comes to the fundamentals of mathematics, what is necessary for them to master? What is that foundation?
Okay, first of all, number facts. And I think people don't pay much attention to number facts: basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, multiplication tables. And I think one of the things that's happened, because students are given calculators so early, they stop using multiplication in terms of memory, and they lose those skills. You have to use them, not to lose them. So you have the basics. Once you're on the other side of the basics, things like fractions, decimals, being able to understand word problems and interpret them properly. In terms of, on the other side of fractions and decimals, the integers, all of the laws for positive and negative numbers. How do you add them? How do you subtract them?
Wow.
Knowing that the rules for multiplication and division are the same. But always, those are your basics, beyond which you really can't do anything past arithmetic. But you've got to master those, and you've got to be able to do multiplication manually, not just with a calculator. So I think it's a matter of parents, using some judgment in terms of how much calculator use is too much.
Right.
And it's one thing if a child uses it to take a test in school, it's another if they're using it to do everything.
I love what we're showing on screen, the House of Math. I love that visual because it has the foundation, which you just described, and then you have the pillars of success that builds this house of math. Love it. Yeah. So something for parents to take a look at. So what careers? I mean, I don't think there's any career that doesn't depend on mathematics. What's your thoughts on that?
More today than anything else, since we're in a high-tech society.
Yeah.
Even if you want to develop video games, a certain amount of math that is needed. Math teaches a foundation for memory, processing, problem solving, that kind of thing. So it's extremely important to understand and be prepared to use it. It develops a type of thinking.
I think also people need to realize when they get to college, they're going to have to take math or science. There is no way around it.
That's right.
And we found that out when our daughter went to George Mason as a dance major. Dawn had gotten this fabulous scholarship covering everything.
Wow.
We were very happy. But she had a choice. As a dance major, she had to take either math or science. And you would think, what's that got to do with the performing arts major? It was a requirement for her degree. One of the things I learned at Nova is that when people are going to major in biology, they have to take a calculus course. If they're going to major in business, they need either calculus or statistics. There is nothing you can do without it. So I think people need to, if possible, fall in love with math. And if they're not going to fall in love with it, at least learn how to do it effectively. Because you can't get your degree unless you know it.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. We have about maybe 4 minutes left, and I want to talk a little bit about, you say organization and neatness is so important to learn math well. I thought that was so profound when we were talking. Speak more about that.
I think one of the things one needs to understand is that when you move up the ladder in math, let's say you get to Algebra 1, primary course, you've got to be organized. You've got to know how to process things because you had all of these units to learn, and they all have their own degree of definitions, processes, and theorems, and examples, and applications. And you've got to know how to connect the dots, because if you don't connect the dots from one chapter to the next, you don't get through the course effectively. You've got to be neat. And people think that you don't have to be neat, that's okay. It's not okay.
When you go into business and you have your career, if you're not organized, if they can't read what you have written, it creates a problem. Even though they can use the computer, the more organized you are, the easier things are. If you have a messy room, you can't find things. I usually tell math students, if they're poor math students, go home and organize and clean up your room.
Exactly.
Because they're simply not being organized, and they go through life not being organized, and therefore they suffer.
Yeah, I want to also add something else. There were so many skills that go into performing well in school. And in both my books, the children's book for math empowerment and the original, the book for math empowerment, I delineate exactly what those skills are, what those attitudes are, what those habits are that have a person in sync and prepared to excel, not just in math, but in many courses across the board.
So we have 2 minutes left, and I want you to give we're in this virtual environment. Maybe by the time we air this show, maybe we will be out of it, but I think part of it's going to be around for us. What can parents do to aid their student learning in a virtual environment?
First and foremost, a parent needs to be sure that they are communicating with their child. Communication in a time like this is very, very important. We need to know what the child is thinking. We need to express love. We need to understand that they are want to be around their friends and they are not around their friends.
That's
We need
beautiful.
communicating with them. We need to help them find new ways to exercise and to be organized, letting them know that this problem shall also pass.
And I think also parents need to, again, get those supplementary materials. I know on Donald's website and mine, we list some companies that will help, and I specifically list some books that will help. And if I can just say very briefly, there's a company out of New York called Amsco School Publications that has everything, all kinds of supplementary textbooks. And I think if they're not learning it on the virtual, in the virtual process the way they're being exposed to it, I think the parents need to have that litany of books at home that will make a difference, whether it's grammar, whether it's math, whether it's science, whatever it is. I think that will make a difference.
That's like amazing. How absolutely wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank both of you, Donald and Sandra, for being on the show and discussing Manigault Institute. And so my inspirational quote this time is from President Barack Obama. When we study together, we learn together. We work together and we prosper together. Thank you for watching Ingrid's World, and don't forget to friend us on Facebook or follow Ingrid's World VA on Twitter and Instagram. And if you miss an episode, you know what to do. Watch Ingrid's World on YouTube or ingridsworld.org. Thanks for watching.